Welcome to How to Be a Dungeon Master. I'm Shelly Mazanoble, and I am very excited by my very special guest. This is Jeremy Cobb, who is 1/3 of the podcast Three Black Halflings, where the crew discusses diversity in D&D and pop culture, which, hello, that rang my bell because I feel like we would have a lot to talk about there. Mm-hmm. And you also give DM tips, which is how I found you, because as a fledgling wannabe dungeon master, I need all the tips that I can get. So, Jeremy, Thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm overjoyed to be here. This is awesome.
I'm so excited. I have it on good authority that we will be talking to you more in depth on a Dragon Talk interview, perhaps with your the other two halflewings.
Yes, you'll get the full set of halflings.
I can't wait. But I'm so excited. Newly discovered your podcast, and I feel like everybody should know about this podcast. So before we delve into some DM tips, can you give us just a little overview of what the podcast is?
Oh, yeah. Okay. It's me and two of my friends, Jasper Cartwright and Unati. She has several names, but she basically goes by Unati. And we talk about, as you said, DMing, diversity, Dungeons and Dragons, all kinds of different pop culture stuff. Sometimes we'll give DM tips. We'll tell stories. We call them Tales from the Table. We'll look at, sometimes we'll do a segment called Wiz of the Rings, where we'll recast existing movies, but with more diverse casts. So we've done Lord of the Rings and Star Wars and stuff like that. And then we've been doing some interviews as well recently.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fun. Just people hanging out, sharing D&D tips and having a good time.
It is. And it makes me feel like I find that I will sometimes talk back to you oh wait, they can't hear me, because it's very comfortable. You can tell that the three of you are very good friends, and I love hearing you erupt in laughter. It always makes me laugh as well. It's just a good time chat about D&D, but you're covering some really important topics, which is why Greg and I are excited to delve into those a little bit deeper, but you do it in such a fun, approachable way. So
thank you.
I'm excited. I'm excited to have discovered a new podcast that I can drop in between all of my Bravo TV show recap podcasts that I also really enjoy. Yes.
Do they still do Top Chef?
Yes, they do.
Oh, I used to love that show.
Yes. Yeah. Well, you can listen to the recaps if you can't watch it yourself.
That's what I'll hop on the recap bandwagon.
Yeah. Sometimes the recaps are actually better than the episode, I will say. So one thing that the topic that I wanted to talk to you about is homebrew. Now, initially when I thought about, people had suggested you should do a segment about homebrew campaigns. And at first I thought, no, because new dungeon masters don't need that kind of pressure. We need to be on rails. We need guidance. No, to create my own campaign, my own world, it's just way too overwhelming. And then I started to think about it, and I thought, but if it was my own, I can make all the mistakes I want, because then I could just say, that's how it happens in my world.
Exactly.
So I don't know. What do you think? Is a homebrew world a good idea for somebody who's not that experienced?
I honestly think it's a great idea. I have never actually run a published adventure, ever.
Oh my God.
The very first time I started DMing, it was entirely homebrew.
What?
Well, for me, my approach, I think, tends to simplify it, because the idea of being I'm going to create an entire world, entire universe, understand everything, all the different groups of people, where they live, and they all have histories and all that, and then I'm going to put the players in there. That's a really daunting idea in and of itself. So I don't do that. What I do is I talk to the players ahead of time about maybe what style of game they might like. And then I basically go through the character creation process with them. So we'll talk about what character races they're interested in playing, what class they're interested in playing, and then especially the backstory and who their character is and where their character's from and who they know and what they want. And once I have that, then I can build a story around that. And I only build the part that I need for the story that I'm telling right now.
Whoa. Did you just see like the light bulb go off above my head? Wait, okay. You create the world after the characters and the backstories and all of that has been created. I don't know why that's like such a novel like, that's amazing. Of course. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's as an example, I do a noir game, like a new 1940s New York noir game with two of my best friends from high school. And almost everything that we're covering is in direct relation to what they wanted to do. One of them's like, I want to be a professional baseball player, plays for the New York Yankees. So it's like, okay, cool. I look at who was on the Yankees roster that year that this is set and create fantasy versions of them. I'm like, okay, we figure out why you're here. You're actually an Irish immigrant who came over. You lived in Boston. You've moved, just got traded to New York. You just shown up. You want to go out and be a vigilante. That was what he wanted to do. He basically is like baseball Batman. And then the other one's like, I'm an Italian immigrant who his dad works at the docks. So I'm a longshoreman. I dropped out of high school. And so it's like, okay, how do we get these guys together? Well, clearly if this guy's wanting to fight crime and this guy works at the docks, somebody's got to come in through the docks. So now this guy shows up to stop it. This guy's getting involved. And like it all builds from there. And everything becomes like a reaction to what they wanted to do. And so I don't need to know what's happening in most of the United States or even in most of New York City. All I need to know is what's happening in the circle directly surrounding these people. And it's absolutely fine. I would say it's a blast, actually.
That actually makes so much sense, especially just building out, like you said, the world the part of the world that you're in that you need to know. But don't you need to be like kind of ahead of the game a little? Because like, what if they go somewhere else that you didn't expect? Or how does that's the part that scares me.
I would say the trick to that is this is very much going to depend on your players, but if you spend time ahead of time with them, ironing down who their characters are and what they want, and then you dangle what they want in front of them, they're almost never going to not go after what they want because you didn't tell them what they want. They told you what they wanted. So if a character is like, my character just dreams of having a cat, and then suddenly they see a poster saying that the dogs and cat shelter is having a free giveaway of animals, and you needed them to get to this shelter, who in their right mind is not going to go after and go try and get a cat from this shelter? You know what I mean? So you don't have to try and make them go there. You just say, this is happening. And they're like, that's where I'm going.
Oh my God. That's also genius. That's okay. Yes. So you will build a world around the players, characters, the backstories, the type of game that they want.
Yeah. Yeah, so, and I'll use elements from like published works. So, the existing classes, existing races, monsters, deities, so in some cases lore. But I'll definitely mix them in with my own ideas and what the characters want to do and alter stuff pretty much as necessary.
Okay.
For the campaign.
So if you're a new dungeon master, you're gonna try to do a little homebrew in here. Like what sorts of things do you have to have in your homebrew campaign? Like, do you need a home base? Do you need NPCs?
You need to know the immediate place where your characters are, where the PCs are. You need to have, I would say, some idea of whatever NPCs or threats there are that they might face in that vicinity. And you need to know, especially if it's like you're just starting out, I think it's very, very helpful to know where you want them to go and talk with them ahead of time so that we all know where you're trying to go. So like the first session I ever did, ever DM'd, one of the characters had really wanted to be like, her goal was to try and make her way in the world. So she had started like a scouting business, like basically like a wilderness tours business. And all of the other characters were on her wilderness tour for varying reasons. but they all had reasons to be going into this forest. And then once in the forest, they came to a crossroads, and there were two options. There was like a really ominous cave that seemed to have some kind of dark power in it. And then off in the forest, they heard somebody screaming, and they could either choose to go after the screaming or go into the cave. And then I had planned kind of what would happen or what they would find in either direction. But
Okay.
I would say, especially early on, a certain level of railroading, I think, is helpful, if only because not only it's helpful for you as the dungeon master, but especially for your players, because everybody's not only getting to know their characters, but the world as a whole. So most people aren't going to feel comfortable just jumping in and attempting to make huge, bold decisions that'll affect everything. They need some guidance as to like, so what is there to do here? Like, what are the people like? Where can I go? And so if you set that out, it won't necessarily feel like railroading. You're just giving them what they're already looking for.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, once you have all that established, you've essentially built a world, and now they can really start to play. And you've only built what you needed along the way. So it's less total work, I would say, at least up front.
Yeah. And then I guess you're also kind of being constantly inspired too by the things that are happening in the game and the choices the players are making, which can help you keep building that world.
So much. It's the campaign, the first ever campaign that I started is still running. And so much of it has been shaped by decisions players have made, some of which absolutely shocked me and have had such large repercussions. Even decisions made in like the third ever session are now coming to fruition a year and a half later.
Oh, wow.
And it's just based on like me creating something, them responding to it, and then me responding to their decisions, and it basically being like a back and forth of storytelling, basically. So
how do you keep track of everything in this world?
A lot of notes. I use Evernote as a program, and where you can like basically have a notebook and have the notebook for an entire campaign, and then you can make individual notes for each session, and then you can also make individual notes for, say, you want to like have a list of ideas that you want to stick into this campaign eventually, or you want to list all of like the lore stuff that you've established, so you have it somewhere. You can have all of that, and so you can just have those windows open up on your computer, so you can be like, right, so this happened and blah blah blah. If somebody asks a question, so it can be very helpful to have that kind of stuff, I would say.
Yeah, what is that called? What was that?
Evernote. It's a free program. I think you can get a professional version, but I've only ever used the free one, and it's been fun.
Okay, so if you're only building out a little, I'm kind of like stuck on this idea because it's changed everything that I thought about about homebrewing. I thought like I had to know it all, and then so you're only building out a little bit of the world at a time, and then so what? Like if you're playing weekly, like after every session, do you just like build out a little bit more? Like, do you just plan your next session by just building a little bit more and then a little bit more the next time? And that's it?
And, well, you can also say, okay, I want to have like an overarching story. Mm-hmm. So you'll establish something that's in the distance that the characters can eventually interact with.
Yeah.
So in one of in that campaign, we had one of the players is playing a Duergar dwarf. And I was like, she doesn't know any other Duergar dwarves. It would be really interesting for her to meet some. And also I found the lore surrounding the Duergar dwarves really interesting, that they're a group of people that were horribly twisted and oppressed. Basically, they're all of the bad things that they do now are as a result of the horrific oppression that they suffered for like hundreds or thousands of years at the hands of the mind flayers. And so their entire philosophy is born out of the suffering that they as a people have endured, which to me is a really interesting concept. So I'm like, okay, well, we have a Duergar in the team, and we have a really interesting moral issue here. So how do we maybe merge these things? And it was just a matter of, okay, there was a Duergar who got banished, so he's close enough for them to be able to find him. And then from there, it's like, how do we get him to go to the city? Well, they'd met this other village of people that they really liked, and Duergar liked to enslave people. These people didn't have a military. They got enslaved. And in fact, not only that, but the player's favorite NPC from that village managed to escape, and they find him collapsed in the cave, and he begs them to help him save his people. Now, the only reason this NPC has shown up again is because they liked him in the first place. So it's not even me telling them they have to do it. It's me setting a thing that they already would have wanted to do in front of them, and then they go and do it. And then I would build up the city in the sessions leading up, and build up the land between them and the city and all that stuff. But it would be like, I'd have like an end goal in mind. But then everything in between that is like, I don't know how we're going to get there, but we'll figure it out as we go.
And that's the part that scares me. But like, it seems like dungeon masters love that too. Like, it's kind of like, it's new and exciting for them too. They're discovering the world and the adventure kind of alongside the players. So I guess I just have to get comfortable with the idea that you don't have to know everything.
Yeah. And here's the thing. If they're asking for something, what you would look at, I would say to cover your bases ahead of time, is look at who the characters are and what they would be likely to know. And if there's something that they would be likely to know about this world that you haven't planned yet, it might be a good idea to at least come up with a vague idea of it in case they ask. But if they wouldn't know and they ask for it, you can just be like, oh yeah, well, because of this, you probably wouldn't know this information. You can roll and see if you get like a hint of it, and then you just come up with like a quick little hint about it. But they don't know everything. Like maybe they heard like a rumor one time about something, but they don't know everything. And now you're like, okay, well, we have this. But on top of that, that's now something they're interested in. So you know that this is something the players want to do, so you can start to build that in the future as well.
Yeah, I guess that's always like, at least with like a published adventure, it kind of like tells you what the party would know at this point. Yeah. So I guess with a homebrew, like, I don't know that I would know how much I would need to disclose to them.
Yeah, it's only as much as you want them to know, and as much as you think that they would need to know in order to be able to proceed with the adventure. Okay. I would say the main trade-off because I've played in some published campaigns. I've never DM'd one, but I played in some, and then I know a lot of people who have run them. And it seems essentially like the main trade-off is if you're playing a published campaign, you have a real sense of structure, and there's a sense of safety there because you now know kind of what's going to happen. You can build a whole bunch of stuff around that, but we have the basic story in place already. Whereas with a homebrew adventure, you can basically do whatever you want. So you lose the safety, but you gain potentially more freedom with what you want to do. And you also gain potentially a greater ability to respond to the desires and needs of the players and the PCs as well.
Yeah, this is crazy. Like, I honestly, like, you're blowing my mind here because I always just thought, like, I would never do this. But the more you're talking about it, the more it's like, this actually could be a really good place to start.
It can be so much fun, and it can be so rewarding because another thing that I would really stress for first-time DMs is, and it's built into kind of the idea of we establish the world with the players ahead of time, but anything adventure-wise that happens should be as much as possible tied into the actual desires of the characters. So it shouldn't just be like, I just really want to have a bunch of oozes that are just consuming the land. And it has nothing to do with anything. I mean, this is a cool idea for a story, potentially, like a big natural disaster. But it's more interesting if the first city these oozes are going to hit is the player's home city. And we know NPCs from there. And like we've met their parents. And the parents aren't going to be able to get away in time. And so now they really have to save them. And on top of that, maybe one of the players is like in line for the throne here, and they have to save this kingdom or else they're just not going to have a kingdom to inherit. And suddenly, like, this natural disaster, which is just a cool idea in of itself, now has real emotional stakes, because if those players fail to save that city, that hits hard. It's not just like, oh, we lost that battle and had to run away. It's like, oh no. And it can really affect then how the character deals with the world after that, because it's like, I'm an orphan because I failed to save my parents. And the other one's like, the one who's in line for the throne is like, I am failing my people. How can I call myself a ruler when I can't even protect the people that I'm supposed to be ruling? And like, you can end up with some really, and you're not the one providing this. It's just happening out of the situation. And then they get to respond to it. And then essentially you build more story out of it.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, this makes sense. Okay. All right.
I'm glad it makes sense.
You're giving me a lot to think about because you're convincing me. And of course, like you alluded to earlier that you can still use elements of published adventures to,
absolutely,
like with the monsters, the magic items, things like that. You can pull from anywhere. It's your world.
And if you needed to, you can even now, since you're doing homebrew, say, recently we had an arc where the players were fighting a bunch of lycanthropes. And I was like, well, these characters are like level 5, level 6, level 7. One were-rat, the were-rat stat block ain't gonna cut it right now. Like, we gotta pump these guys up, give them some more stuff. And now we start to build a society out of this. Maybe these were-rats also, this particular were-rat is also a wizard. So you combine the were-rat stat block with the mage stat block, and you're like, and you start to build, or maybe you're like, you know what? I actually did this. I was like, I really want them to fight something that's super agile in a tree. So I had them fight a were-gibbon who was a wizard. And so I basically created a stat block for the were-gibbon that was based on, I think it was like the existing were-rat and werewolf stat blocks, but just with some abilities that would be like gibbon specific. So like tree climbing stuff and things like that. And then she also could just cast spells. And something that on its own may not have been a super threat to level 6 or 7 characters suddenly became really difficult to deal with, because now you have a person 40 feet above you throwing fireballs down on you, and you can't even get to them because they're running around to the other side of the tree every single time.
That seems unnecessarily really cruel. Yeah. Interesting. The Dungeon Master says interesting.
They still won the battle in the end. The druid had such a smart strategy of just continually moving just out of range of counterspell, and she fully saved the day. It was, as a DM, I was like torn between being so frustrated and so proud.
Yes. I imagine that's a feeling Dungeon Masters have to experience all the time. Torn between. Yes, it's kind of like being a parent as well. Like your kid does something really inappropriate, but kind of funny.
Yeah. Or it's like, or you're doing something and your kid's like, but mom, you said that you shouldn't do this, and you're like, darn it, they learned.
I know, they learned it. You listened, and now you're throwing it in my face.
Exactly.
So one of the other things, in just the couple minutes that we have left here, is that I saw on your description of things you guys talk about, DM mishaps.
Yeah.
I mean, I know we probably need more time and we can touch on it later, but I feel like that's probably something I need to talk to you about.
Yeah. I mean, the first one I made right off the bat was when I first started DMing, I had not played very much, so I didn't really know how important Constitution was as an ability score. And so our ranger ended up with like an 8 for Constitution. The druid had a 10. And that was a problem for, like, the ranger kept getting knocked out. And so I eventually was like, okay, look, guys, I made a mistake. We got to re-roll this, because this is my fault. I told you guys to put those there. Like I said, yeah, it'll be fine. Or another example, this is an important, I think, principle. Do not include any item in your campaign that you are not okay with the players eventually getting. Because I, at one point, had this character show up he was never supposed to lose, but he showed up. He had the wings of flying. He had the flame tongue sword. He had the cubic gate and all these things. And I had not anticipated them turning on this guy, but not only did they turn on him, but one of them managed to knock him out, and he got his mind eaten by an intellect devourer. It's a whole thing. But essentially, the druid got a hold of the cubic gate.
Oh,
and so now I'm like, oh my God, they can just teleport anywhere. Oh no. And
Oh,
so
that's interesting.
my plans started to get so long for every session, because now I had to be like, I have to start building every single location that they might want to go to. And it was so stressful. It was such a stressful period.
Couldn't you have just like broken it? Like just be like, oh, I don't know what happened.
I don't want to do that. That would be, you don't want to punish the players for
No,
doing
you're
something
right.
creative. You get like, that would be like, it's like Sir King Arthur pulls gets Excalibur out of the lake, and it's like, oh, sorry, bro. It's the blade rusted in the water and broke off.
It's
My bad, dude.
disintegrating. Yeah,
Yeah.
sorry. Oh, that salt air, it'll do it.
Yeah, I mean, the hilt is still cool, right?
Fine. All right.
Yeah.
Well, clearly I have a lot to learn about being a dungeon master, but
I still have a lot to learn. It's a whole learning process. Trust me, you never stop learning.
You don't
as
stop
a dungeon
learning.
master.
But you do
Never.
need to just start. So I feel like that's what my goal is. Just start. And you know what? I might just start with a world that I create with the help of my players. But
of course, it's so much fun. Absolutely give it a shot. Absolutely. Okay. And anyone out there who hasn't done it, please give it a shot. It's a lot more fun and rewarding than you might think, and less scary than you might think.
That's the part that I am actually very surprised at. You are making it seem less scary and like a good idea, a good place to start. So I know there's a million other things that we could be talking about. You've given me so many ideas. I was writing things down for next time, because there will be a next time. But oh yeah. So I just want to thank you for taking the time to do this and enlightening me and giving me some really good tips. And hopefully for other people out there who are considering spending a little bit of time behind the screen, you've made it a little less daunting for us.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's been a real pleasure.
Will you tell people where they can find you and learn more about Three Black Halflings, the amazing podcast?
Yeah, absolutely. We have our Twitter page at TB Halflings. Our show our podcast is available on pretty much every major podcasting platform. It's just called Three Black Halflings. And actually, if you're interested in hearing more about my DMing style as well as the DMing styles of the other two players, we actually have episodes. By the time this is released, I think all three of us will have episodes out that actually talk about our DMing styles. I think mine will be the most recent episode. Jasper's is called Trash, Puppies, and Cheese, if you want to find that one. And Unati's is called Mansa Musa Ain't Got Nothing on Me. And they're both, Unati actually exclusively does published adventures. So you'll hear three different approaches to DMing.
That's amazing.
And actually, lastly, we have a Twitter stream that will have already happened, or a Twitch stream that will have already happened by the time this comes out. But if you want to hear my DMing in action, you'll hear me running a game in the new Wagadu setting by Twin Drums. It's an Africa-based 5e setting, and that'll be released on Twitch when this is out, and actually also in podcast form. So
my God.
if you want to hear this in action, there you go.
I do. Absolutely. Oh, that's awesome. That's incredible. Clearly, you're keeping busy. Also, people should definitely check out just your Twitter feed for Three Black Halflings, because it's very, very entertaining just to read.
Thank you. Jasper does a great job with it. He's the main one who runs it. He does a fantastic job.
That's awesome. All right. Jeremy, thank you so much. I look forward to the next time that we chat.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Shelly. Look forward to it too.
All right. Take care. Have a good one.
Bye.
Bye.